The ongoing saga regarding the Wii U situation has a very glaring plot hole that I don't think anybody else is really acknowledging. Everybody is coming out screaming about how 2012 to 2017 was like a dark time to be a Nintendo fan. There was nothing coming out on the Wii U. Ooh, I was so upset on E3 2015. Yeah, hey genius, the 3DS existed. Like sometimes you'll see them like acknowledge the 3DS was like carrying Nintendo through that period, but you also see them fail to acknowledge just how popular that thing was, right? They put out some of the best games they've ever put out ever on that thing. Fire Emblem Awakening, Kid Icarus Uprising, the Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, right? Like that thing was an absolute beast. My personal favorite handheld ever. And yet through that entire year, what like that entire life cycle, what did we get? Right? Right out of the gate, very similar discourse to the Wii U. Oh, it's too expensive. Oh, it has no games. Oh, where's the third party support? It wasn't until Fire Emblem Awakening came out that the console finally started like becoming popular and started being talked about. But people were religiously downplaying that thing all throughout its life cycle. That very infamous article from Colin Moriarty on IGN, right? The PlayStation Vita is set to succeed. Like, what did that thing predict? That the Vita would have way more games than the 3DS, that it would be way more successful, that Nintendo would leave the console industry forever. None of that happened, right? Like that article became a complete joke for a reason. The 3DS was the true winner of that console generation, while the Wii U was the second place contender, right? The 3DS was phenomenal, right? Like the 3DS destroyed the PS4 in every way, shape, and form, destroyed the Vita in every way, shape, and form, right? Nintendo fans were eating good all throughout that time period. My issue with this, and I've alluded to this fact several times, is that gaming YouTubers did not acknowledge it. The 3DS was massively successful, but what did we see from the community? Downplaying all these major releases. Stuff like 3D Land became a relatively obscure property. Games like Pilot Wing Resort were excessively downplayed, right? You have like absolute bangers that just went completely unnoticed. Remember what happened after the Switch came out? This is another thing too. Like after the Switch came out, like people were screaming like to high heaven about how like the 3DS was doomed. Nintendo's going to retire it very soon. There's going to be no more games. And what did we get? Ever Oasis, which is a classic. Samus Returns, which is a classic. WarioWare Gold, which brought a glorious return back to classic WarioWare, right? After a tad bit of a hiatus, right? We got a Luigi's Mansion port, right? We got like all this really really cool stuff in that time period up until the console was discontinued like a decade after release, right? The 3DS had an absolute banger of a life cycle, and yet somehow it failed in the eyes of the YouTube gaming community. Hmm. Kind of amazing how that happens, isn't it? Kind of amazing how nobody is bringing up the 3DS at all during these discussions of the Wii U's legacy, right? It's kind of amazing how everyone just kind of conveniently forgets about all of those great games and everything the console delivered, and just how like endlessly memorable and fun it was, right? Like I love my 3DS, and I still get a lot of mileage out of it, right? Like I've been playing it recently. Like I do think that the way the 3DS is treated now is a really good indication of how these fair weather Nintendo fanboys treat successful gaming consoles, because they'll tell you that the Wii U was the worst thing possible because of the sales numbers, but you know, they say they love the GameCube. They don't talk about the Wii, which did win that console generation, right? They don't really talk about the original DS, and as we've established in this video, they're not really talking about the 3DS either, right? Even now when like the networks is being shut off, Pokemon the three sixth and seventh gen will not be playable anymore through the Nintendo Wi-Fi network, right? Like Like these are big deals, but everyone is fixated on the Wii U. Like I think because traditionally gaming journalists have pretended that like Nintendo handhelds don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like they really do try to pretend like that like a lot of these games can't compete with their counterparts, which I'm increasingly becoming aware is not true. You know, games like Fire Emblem are superior to a lot of their counterparts on console. You know, Fire Emblem Awakening is better than Unicorn Overlord, right? Like, and again, like this is obvious to anyone who plays these games, but if you're like a game journalist who purely judges things based on like presentation, on graphics, you know, how many clicks you can get on a YouTube video, like, yeah, you're going to ignore all of these like lower fidelity games. You know, like is anybody gonna look at like Shin Megami Tensei 4, right, and say that like, oh, that looks amazing? Oh, like no, like that game was excessively downplayed, right? You have like all those other niche titles that came out around that time, right? You have games that uh, that were just ignored in general, right? Like there are probably dozens and dozens of 3DS games that have become kind of obscure, like purely because the gaming journalism industry did not do its job and cover all of these games properly. That is the reality when it comes to this industry. Like, if gaming YouTubers like Game Explain or Scott the Waz or Arlo really love video games, they would be talking about the 3DS a lot more because that was the console to own in the 2010s.